about the Inflation Reduction Act. It was not a candy, but it sure tastes good every time I talk about it. And the bipartisan infrastructure law. And now we have 25 leadership states and territories that have made climate commitments that align with all of the opportunities that they can keep pushing moving forward. So life is good, and we have to remember that, right? We have to celebrate where we are and continue to push, and that's what this is all about. So without further ado, I'm going to play Stump the Chump and see if I can't ask questions that Rick Duke doesn't know, because I've lived my life doing that, and I'm not going to stop now. That's not true. Actually, I've never been able to stump him. Now, his answers may not be right, but I don't know that. Rick, I know you have to leave, so I'm going to ask you 2 questions. Or do you not have to leave and you're too humored by my wonderfully gracious introduction? All right. Well, let me start by mentioning that well, there are a range of recent emission projections that are all showing the U.S. is making impressive progress. But guess what? It's not all we have to do. We're falling a little bit short. So can you talk just a little bit, as somebody who's been watching this platform for a long time, about just how important it is to do subnational work? I think we forget that all the time, and you've been doing this work a long time. So can you just give us some sense of what you see about that collaboration and the need for that moving forward?
Yeah, thanks so much, Gina, and thanks for the roasting. Well earned. So a few quick thoughts. I mean, I just want to note that the United States had a goal of 17% reductions by 2020, and we actually over-delivered on that, in part through state action, state and local action, as well as federal steps. I had the privilege to run the interagency process to set what was, at the time, our 2025 goal to cut emissions 26 to 28% by 2025. With these new federal legislation in place, we're going to deliver on that as well. It's very clear from all the analysis that's out there, including some from University of Maryland, Nate Holman, and others. We're tracking to deliver, even over-deliver on that prior 2025 target. And now with the 2030 target that I had the privilege to once again work on in the Biden administration to cut our emissions at least 50%, 50 to 52% by 2030. We are, with this landmark legislation, above all, the Inflation Reduction Act, with its uncapped and sustained and comprehensive tax credit incentives, we are already about 4/5 of the way to that target. Best estimates are we're going to be in a new reference case is something like 40% reductions by 2030. And the key is that incentive structure means that everything that states and cities do next is incented by that set of tax credits at the federal level. Same thing for federal standards as well. So you're running downhill with the wind at your back in order to go from ambitious targets by states, and many of them, like Maryland, have incredible targets, to ambitious policies to back up and actually deliver on those goals at the state and local level. And when you're doing that, at every step of the way, you know you've got a comprehensive, durable, and really, really substantial set of incentives for the energy transition from the Inflation Reduction Act, making it possible. But so there's no way to overstate the importance of states especially, but states and cities, and getting us all the way there from that 40 to 50% minimum reduction by 2030. And we are enthusiastic and really very confident that states are answering the call, picking up on those incentives and running with them. And it's a really exciting time for state and local government. And I tell all the sort of early career people that ask me, where should they go work? I tell them, go find a state capital that's doing this work and get involved, because that's really where the action is right now, above all.
Well, Rick, both you and I know that it hasn't always been this good, right? We've worked with it. It was really tough to get any resources, never mind the magnitude that we have now. And really, it's the positive opportunity framing That's so exciting. I mean, makes a huge difference. Now, I don't want to go back to you quite so soon, but I will anyways. But I know you've been playing a leadership role, frankly, in the U.S. delegations for quite a while, and you've been focused on the global stock take. Can you just sort of give everybody a sense of what that is? Because you're going to be hearing about it and hearing about it and hearing about it, and just how critical that is, and what signal is that going to send to the subnational levels in terms of what we need to do to make this a broader response?
Yeah, thank you for the question. That is very much at the heart of this COP28 experience. The global stocktake is a formal part of the Paris Agreement multi-year calendar. Every 5 years, and this is a critical kind of the beating heart of the Paris Agreement, is that every 5 years governments come together and set these nationally determined contributions, these targets 10 years out, set every 5 years. In between those target setting years, we have these global stocktake moments, and this is the first time we're doing a global stocktake. The global stocktake is, in a sense, a consensus negotiated self-evaluation of how we're doing on the whole Paris Agreement. So it covers all the different elements from adaptation to mitigation and finance and you name it. Just to comment on the mitigation part, the how are we doing on keeping 1.5C within reach part of it, that is, as you can imagine, complicated when the whole world kind of has a vote in what the global stocktake says at the end of the day. So in many ways, the process of the discussion, the process of the debate is, I won't say as important as the outcome, but it's important to watch kind of who's where and why in the negotiations, because as is always the case, you know, there are many different interests at stake in this. I can tell you from the United States government perspective, what we seek is clarity that we've done a lot on keeping 1.5 within reach before 2015, before the Paris Agreement was secured, before Gina and I had the privilege to work on the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol and all the other progress we've seen in recent years. We were headed towards a 4 degrees centigrade hellscape. I mean, it was a really terrible trajectory. Now, nobody talks about that. We're really headed to kind of 2.5 to 3, depending upon who you talk to. That's not 1.5 though. So clearly, one thing we want to affirm as the United States government is that we made a lot of progress, but there's a lot more still to do. And then there's a lot of different elements there, but we're focused on a few things that I think absolutely crucial and where we made some headway recently. One is every economy needs to be taking a comprehensive approach to these every 5-year Paris Agreement nationally determined contribution targets. And the good news is, just last month, Secretary Kerry negotiated with his counterpart in China an agreement that for the first time, China's going to step up and for its next target, address its non-CO2 greenhouse gases in an economy-wide fashion. That's the equivalent of taking the 3rd largest country in the world and putting them into the Paris Agreement architecture where it needs to be for China to fully address. And we're inviting other countries to do the same thing in the next cycle. So that's part of the global stocktake conversation as we see it. But we also need to see serious action on rapid energy transition by 2050, and there's different ways to formulate that, and I won't get into the nuance here. The second thing we need to see is continued commitment to end deforestation by 2030. And the final thing we need to see is that we really need to cut all these non-CO2 superpollutants where, Gina, you've been such a leader in making that happen over the years. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about. And then there's a whole set of other elements and nuances in other domains beyond just the mitigation piece.
Well, thanks, Rick. That was a really comprehensive answer. And the only thing I want to roll back to is to just thank you, frankly, for the Kigali Amendment. If I remember correctly, you were walking in your sleep most of the time because nobody slept at all. And we were in Dubai together, focused on the same issue, and it's made a big difference. It made a big difference to me to know that we could get that done. With, frankly, the U.S. was totally in the leadership position there, and you were really terrific.
if I could come in on that very briefly, I just walked by a space in one of these hotels somewhere in the city, and I did a double take because I realized that's where Gina McCarthy was huddled with a bunch of the negotiators negotiating about element. And I really
it
did a
was
flashback.
space of
I'm not making
about
this up.
a ninth of this room. And we never let anyone out of the room. It was great.
The other thing I want to just say very briefly on that is we've seen UAE step up and ratify Kigali here, and we've seen just a month ago the world step up and double the funding for the multilateral fund to the Kigali Amendment. So we're on a racing start to actually implement that, get at that up to 0.5 degree centigrade prize, and that's a big part of why we're not talking about 4 degrees anymore.
Absolutely. And the only other thing is to just recognize that, you know, the agreement between China and the U.S. was awesome. People totally underestimated the signal that send to the world. So there's lots of good things happening, as you can tell, and we just need to keep that momentum. But you are excused if you want. If you'd like to sit here and be enthralled further about my momentary comments, you can stay as well. But thanks, Rick, for everything you're doing. Madam Secretary, you're next,
Okay.
although I have trouble calling you Madam. Serena, can I do that?
Yes.
Serena, yeah, but okay,
I've
good.
always been your Serena.
Hey, Maryland, you are in Maryland, one of only 9 U.S. states that have binding climate commitments. First of all, what were you thinking? I mean, that makes it hard. It means that this is state law now.
It is.
So tell me, what's it done in terms of getting some momentum to the targets that you have and bringing real accountability to the table as you track things?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying America is all in, but Maryland is really all in. And we pretty much demonstrated that with the goals that we have. And they are aggressive. And I'll just give you some context. The national goal is 50 to 52% by 2030. The global goal is 45% by 2030. Maryland, our goal is 60% by 2031.
All right.
Yes. And we are going to meet that goal. And we're not in the habit of making these broad goals or we're going to be even, we're going to be even more aggressive. Nope, we have a plan. And I could talk about that next, but we do have a plan, a strategy that will lead us to meeting that aggressive goal. And it will not be easy. It will be hard. And so that's to answer your question about what we're doing in terms of the goal. But I will tell you, too, we've made a lot of progress. We have the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative in Maryland, and we were a founding member of it back in 2006. So we've been doing that for 15 years. And just to talk quickly about progress, since then, economy-wide, we've reduced emissions by 30%. And with RGGI, we reduced emissions by 60% in the power plant sector, and that is huge. It's twice as fast as the rest of the United States. So that's the power of a cap and invest program. And with that program, we were able to bring in $1 billion to Maryland. And we use, that's the invest part, right? So we get the proceeds. And from those proceeds, we've taken that money and ensured that we are moving toward a just transition in Maryland because we use most of that money to offset costs for the low-income community in their bills. So we have the bill assistance program. And we also use a portion of that money to invest in the renewable side of Maryland in terms of all the technologies and things that we're trying to do, particularly the solar panels and the solar industry. So that's where we are.
Well, Serena, I know that there's been, a lot of discussion about goal setting, but honestly, it is so important to set stretch goals. But it's also important that when you come close to achieving them, stop poking people in the eye for the 1 or 2% they didn't get. Especially if they're working as hard as I know you're working, and so I know you'll get there. And I know that these goals are aggressive, and I just can't thank you enough because it sets a pace for other states.
Yes.
You know how we compete furiously
Yes.
across states,
We're
which is
competing.
great. Caroline, can we talk a little bit about the power sector? Because I know that it obviously plays an important role in the United States. And there is a transition going on to clean energy. So what have you been seeing? And don't tell me how great California is. Yeah. We hear that all the time. No, I'm only kidding. They're doing great. But tell me what you're seeing and what, clean electricity standards and other economy-wide measures really are making a difference.
They really are. And I guess maybe start at a 100,000-foot level that our industry across the board in the United States has been leading the way for the United States to meet its greenhouse gas commitments. 40% below 2005 levels. We are at 1984 emission levels today. And most of the new generation being built and brought online in the U.S. is now clean, emission-free energy. So the power sector as a whole is leading the way, and California is probably at the forefront of that, right? So 100% emission-free energy by 2045, a carbon neutrality goal by 2045, 80% renewables by 2030. We're already 60% clean in California. Pairing that with energy storage, we have brought on 8,000 megawatts of energy storage in California just in the last 4 years. It has been instrumental in assuring that the lights stay on when we've had these heat waves in late summer, early fall. And that has been part of the policy of California, of like having these ambitious climate goals, pairing that with policies like the renewable portfolio standard, light procurement targets for the investor-owned utilities and others, like the emission-free car goal, so all new cars being sold in California by 2035, emission-free, putting money behind building electrification. So all these things, from an ambitious goal to policies to programs that are allowing California to hopefully achieve these goals. That said, we are not on track for 2030. Our goal is 40% below 1990 emission levels by 2030. We did a paper 2 years ago, Mind the Gap, that talked about the need to really accelerate action. We had to accelerate to really 4 times the emission reductions year over year between now and 2030. That was 2 years ago. We haven't hit the 4 times yet, and so it's made it even more difficult to hit that 2030 target, and that is foundational to getting to the 2045 target. So more work to be done in California, as much as we've done, and we celebrate those successes, as you talk about, Gina, but more work that we have to do to get the right programs in place and really speed acceleration, the action that we're hearing so much about at this COP really is coming home in California.
Well, I know how hard California's trying, and frankly, I applaud them because it's so challenging there. The kind of disruptions and the kind of climate chaos that we're seeing is extraordinarily difficult. So thank you for all that you're doing. Pam, you're on next. First of all, I want to say, give me an E, give me a D, give me an F. Yeah, baby. Yeah, honestly, the work that you were doing with the methane satellites and things, it is so paying off. It was a long stretch, but really, give Fred my best. He's done amazing, and the opportunity we have on methane to both detect it and jump at it now is extraordinary, and it would not have happened if you guys weren't out front.
Thank you, Gina.
But that wasn't my question. It actually wasn't a question at all, in case anybody noticed. But Pam, you've been doing a lot of analysis, which is what you guys do, so thank you. How are states doing on their climate commitments? And please don't pick on California or Maryland specifically. It will cause bad
That would be
vibes.
awkward. Thanks, Gina. We actually did release a new emissions analysis today, and I'd love to run through a few quick slides, and the clicker works.
Movies.
And the point of the analysis was really to figure out the impact that states, those that have actually stepped up proactively and made commitments, could have on the US NDC if they actually hit their emission abatement targets. So we looked at emissions projections using updated data from Brodian Group, US Climate Service, and these emissions projections include the impact associated with federal investments. as I think you alluded to earlier, Gina, and Rick talked about, for background, there have been a multitude of recent analyses from Princeton, from Bloomberg NEF, from US DOE, and more that all show a real good news story, right? Really significant abatement in the US and a powerful emissions reduction trajectory on the heels or the heels of the IRA. But there's still a gap to our NDC. There's more to do. So we wanted to take a look and see if all of these states together met the targets they set, what would that do to our progress in the NDC? And the good news is that they could cut the gap in half. So if all of these states who've already proactively said, yes, we're in, yes, we're going to do it, actually met the goals on a 7 to 8 year time horizon, we could reduce the gap that the U.S. has to meet their NDC by nearly a half. It's actually 48.2% or something, which is really exciting. So this is the theme that Rick started us off with. We really can't underestimate the power of subnational action in the U.S., particularly at the state level, to have a really compelling impact on our nationally determined contribution. However, it's always a however. The other key top line from the analysis is that they can only play this transformational role if we really deliver on these pledges. We're a little off track. We're not totally off track, but there's still some work to do in terms of the collective movement of these 25 states and territories that have made commitments. So we've got to pick up the pace a little bit in terms of the abatement trajectory. The exciting news, as Gina and Rick talked about, is that there's never been a better time for the U.S. to go big on state-level climate policy. We have the significant federal investments in the IRA and the bipartisan infrastructure law that have just dramatically bought down the cost associated with achieving these targets, and importantly, bought down the cost associated with putting in place policies that actually require emissions to decline at the pace and scale consistent with the target. So it's a good news. It's a really good news story and a sort of moment to animate action and to take the opportunity to pair the federal carrots, the federal incentives, with some really well thought through sticks at the state level to ensure that abatement materializes.
And I'm excited about how tough the methane standards are coming out of EPA, and we all have to work hard to make sure that they are as tough, if not tougher, because that's one of our magnificent opportunities. But I know I would talk a lot about the Inflation Reduction Act, but we probably ought to talk more about it, because frankly, there's a lot of resources that are going to states and local communities, and consumers are benefiting. We just have to get people excited about the moment, right? And you're right to just point out that we're just not there yet, and we shouldn't be shy to talk about it. We're dealing with the most difficult challenge humanity has ever faced, but we're stepping up in a big way, and every step we take is a step closer. But we have to keep running. I don't feel yet comfortable about pace, how fast we can accelerate. And
There are so many benefits to the IRA, and we do, to your point, Gina, have to just get the word out, because there's so much benefit to consumers and the opportunities they have to leverage that new law to make changes in their lifestyle that are positive changes. And we've done a lot in terms of customer education, trying to put it in bill inserts and community meetings and that sort of thing, and doing it in various languages, because that's another, is just trying to make sure in a diverse population that we're getting the word out, not just in English and Spanish, but the Asian languages and multiple languages, and also with our tribes, really focusing on our tribal communities as well, to make sure that they're also aware of the opportunities to take advantage of the new law.
That's a good way to sort of get back to Serena on this, because I know that there's critical progress that's being made, but so much more to do. But what I always focus on is, I feel like if we can get community level action so that people can see their lives are being benefited, that it makes it so much more difficult, no matter what the big P politics are, to take these resources away. how are you reaching out to your communities around this? Is do they see it as an opportunity driven? You know, I see Maine like kicking butt on heat pumps. You know, I mean, I've never seen anything like this. I still don't know how they work, but I really like them. So what are you seeing really among your communities? Are people getting excited?
Yeah, the communities are getting really excited. Believe me, they're knocking down my doors in
Yeah.
Maryland, and everyone has a voice, everyone has an opinion, and everyone wants to meet with me. Honestly, when I first started, I didn't realize how much the community and businesses are so involved in Maryland. Like, I am meeting with people every single day. I can't get my work done because people want to know, tell me about those goals.
Yeah.
How do you intend to implement those goals? Hey, that's impacting me and us and my community. What are you doing? How are we going to be a part of, that be at the table when you're making those decisions? And so it's just a constant communication. It's a constant having people at the table when we're making these decisions. So it's an all-in society kind of approach that we have in Maryland, and it's energized. It's energized.
Yeah, it really is exciting. And, you know, one of the things that I know that I've been doing as the managing co-chair of America is All In is we've been going to unusual suspect cities.
Yes.
To just go, and it's something called, what is it called? Cash in on clean energy. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Gina, I'll say
Which-
this. Oh, sorry.
It's just basically going there and
Yeah.
telling people that there's these opportunities and providing training programs for folks. Information is still power, and we've been saying that. I've been saying that for 50 years.
Yes, and it's resonated.
Yeah.
Because one other thing that I'm doing in Maryland is I have something called listening tours. And I've been moving around Maryland, going to all the communities, especially the environmental justice communities, and telling them what's going on. This is the movement. This is what we're doing. How is this impacting you? And they've been a part of the process, and it's been wonderful.
Yeah. Well, it's great because there's an advantage for them in this.
Yes.
And, you know, but I mean, I'm sure you have challenges. You have a lot of fossil fuels to worry about. How are you are they knocking on your door? Are they running away screaming? That's what I want to know. What do you think? How do you deal with it?
Well, both. They're hearing what's going on. For example, everyone in Maryland, they realize we have these really aggressive goals. And we had, back in June, we commissioned the University of Maryland to help us come up with a pathway, like how are we going to meet these goals? And there was a lot in there in terms of impacts to the building sector, impacts to the public. And so that's when people are knocking down our doors, my doors, saying, hey, I see that pathway report.
Yeah.
What is that going to do with us? And they realize that we have a final report that's coming out this month that I can't talk about too much. But they realize, and we've been having meetings and commission meetings where we're bringing all of industry in. The whole building industry has been meeting with us in a task force. And
Wow.
all of industry, and I chair the Maryland Commission on Climate Change. And so all of these ideas from everyone across Maryland have been in the meetings giving us recommendations. And at the end of this month, we're going to lay it out. And really let them know this is how you will be impacted and this is how we need you. So 2 areas in which we're going to really highlight as a strategy is, one, we're going to push the building sector. We're going to push them to start decarbonizing quicker and using heat pumps and thinking about those innovations. And then the second area that we're going to talk about more clearly in that report is electrifying the transportation sector.
Yeah.
And moving forward on EVs and things like that. So they know it's coming, but yes, it's been an all hands-on approach and trying to, because we need them. We need everyone. So we're trying to go from what you said, pledge to priorities, or
Policy.
pledge to policy. We're going from rhetoric to results.
Yep.
Just to throw out a 60% number,
I love
I'm a
that.
numbers person. That means nothing to me. So we're going to make sure we meet those goals and have strategies to do it.
That's terrific. That deserved a clap. So Caroline, I know that the pace is not what it needs to be. What are the creative ideas that you may be bringing to the table to really think about how we make this go at the kind of speed that we need this transition? I know it's happening, but what's the juice that's going to really kick it up?
So there are a few things. Certainly permitting and siting reform is really critical. Yeah. In California, we hear, so Serena just joined the Public Policy Committee of Velos, a nonprofit that I chair, and on here is the vice chair, and its intent is to advance EV adoption among consumers through awareness, through programs. And so one of the things is more awareness, like getting the word out, to your point, and making sure they know these programs. I mean, the IRA, one of the best things in the IRA is the $4,000 pre-owned vehicle tax credit.
Absolutely.
You know, and you pair that with SCE has a program so that income qualified customers get either a $1,000 or a $4,000 credit as well. And so those two paired together can really help drive down the cost of a pre-owned vehicle for our moderate income customers. So education is definitely one. Permitting and siting reform is another. In California, it takes more time to put in an EV charger than other states. We constantly hear that at our board meetings from our EVSE company members, that we take 30 days longer in California than elsewhere. So we've got to do something about speeding up the process at the state and local level so that infrastructure can get in the ground, not just for charging infrastructure, but for grid infrastructure. Our latest white paper talks about the need for 4 times this pace of growth of the transmission system between now and 2045 to accommodate all the electrification and clean energy that's going to be needed to meet our goals. 10 times that pace at the distribution level. That is going to need change in processes, both at the utility level as well as at the state and local level. So that's a huge one for us. I think, having funding, it really is critical. Affordability is top of mind for so many people, especially now with higher inflation. And so thinking about ways to drive affordability. At the end of the day, energy costs are going to be a lower share of wallet because people are going to use more electricity. That electricity bill will be higher, but less energy, no gasoline, right? Diesel, all those things are going to be eliminated or greatly reduced. So the energy share of wallet will be down, but in this period of transition, people are very worried about that cost. And so we need to work together on what are those programs, utility programs, state programs, to help drive affordability in this transition. Those are 2, I would say.
I know, if you do not do that, people will think the promise has been broken, in my opinion, because we need to be better at having ongoing dialogue. I feel like many times we just, put out a report and it just sits there. And Pam, I know you've done a lot of work on this. So how does the EDF and the others in the nonprofit community, how do we get a more ongoing dialogue about what we know and what it means? I feel like it's a quick rush to get things done, and it's 2 meetings to talk about it, but people need to understand.
Yeah. It's a great question, and I think, as an advocate, the report obviously has recommendations in it.
There you go.
And as an advocate, our recommendations are going to sound the same as they've sounded for the last few years coming from EDF. So we're trying to do the sort of repetition angle and hope that
it works on kids sometimes.
That there's liftoff. So I actually want to highlight 3 recommendations from our report for us to be able to take the rhetoric to reality and move the pledges to policy.
You guys are really good at this alliteration.
Really good at that. Yeah, I feel like we could figure something out. The first recommendation, and it's critical and often overlooked, and I'm so excited to be sitting here on the stage with someone from Maryland who has done this, is to make climate targets binding. And California, obviously, as well. There are only 10 states in the U.S. that have binding mandatory climate targets, meaning the target is in law. And not only is it in law, but there's a directive for a regulatory agency to actually operationalize it, to put it in action. And that's absolutely critical. To the extent that we have state legislatures that are willing to act and we have governors that are willing to sign laws, we need to, that's the first thing that should be done. It should be moved through every single trifecta legislature in the country, because what that means is those targets are then long-term durable. Doesn't matter what administration is in and out. It's going to be a lot harder with a different, potentially with a different administration, but you've still got a proactive agenda.
Bite your tongue. Sorry. Continue.
So we need to make that happen. It's durability. It's also certainty for industry. You sort of know where the state is going from a climate perspective, as opposed to ping-ponging back between executives. The second recommendation is that we need binding limits on pollution. It is very hard to ensure that pollution declines at the pace and scale consistent with the problem without actually designing your policies to ensure that that happens, to go after them directly. This doesn't mean it's the only tool in the climate policy toolbox. It just means it has to be part of the suite of things that a state does. And such limits can be applied at the source level, at the sector level, at a multi-sector level, economy-wide. And there's a variety of states across the country that have done so. Washington State, California have economy-wide programs. A bunch of states in the Northeast have programs that have limited pollution from the power sector, and that is really a critical component to a broad climate policy agenda, because it increases the certainty over the abatement over a set period of time, and that's really powerful. It's worth noting, I think, that directly regulating pollution at the source is the type of strategy that many governors, including those that don't have legislative support, have in their control. There's ample existing authority at the state level, just like there is at the US federal level, to regulate air pollution from the environmental agencies. And it's exactly what former Governor Kate Brown did in Oregon when she developed a program to cap emissions from fuels, from fuel use in the state, after the legislature, minority in the legislature, prevented action through walkouts. So that's really critical, to sort of think about regulating pollution and to think about the role that actual policies designed to control pollution at the pace and scale required can play as part of a broad climate policy portfolio. And then the third recommendation is that states really need to think carefully and ensure and design their policies in a way that the environmental benefits and economic benefits are directed to communities that have historically been impacted by a myriad of health-related impacts and environmental-related impacts, and are most likely to be adversely affected by climate change. And there are ways to do that. There are ways to design your policies to help direct the benefits and the burdens in a way that improves equity, and particularly environmental equity at the state level. So the sort of short answer, which maybe I should have started with, Gina, is that the best way to ensure the best way to ensure that pollution declines with these critical targets is to design policies targeted to cut pollution and to make sure that emissions and the trajectory towards your targets is sort of a key piece of your climate policy framework and of your thinking over time.
Well, thanks. That was really comprehensive. Thanks. No, I mean that. That one wasn't a joke. No, it's really important to walk through that, because I feel like this is like building something with a bunch of different tiles and things. It's not. There's no one thing. Yep. But I do believe that the way change happens is that when it gets to a certain level, it takes on its own weight, and it flies. And so one of the things I was just going to ask, and this can be for the three of you, is, we've been spending a few days here, and I think I've seen some things that are pretty exciting and perhaps some disappointing. Is there anything that sticks in your mind at this point that you'd want to raise that either can be something that others ought to duplicate and think about, or are there challenges that you're seeing here that you didn't anticipate? Tough questions, so just think them through.
I'll just mention the transitioning, having a real transition plan, is important.
Yeah.
Because, like, for example, in Maryland, we have, and I've been hearing that since I've been here, is where is that transition plan, right? So in Maryland, we have 3 power plants that are planning to decommission and close. One is I think they're planning 2024, and one is 2025. For us, it's like, great, yes. But when you think about it, it's like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We do need energy. And so what is the plan? So a lot of people are like, okay, fine. A lot of industries and companies are fine. You want to get rid of us? Okay, we're done. But we can't. We need a plan. We need a transition plan. And I just think that we're not focusing enough on making sure that we have a plan. We have renewables. We are bringing renewables to scale. We're looking a lot closer to green hydrogen, solar, wind. And so we're talking about it. We have 100% goals by 2035, and we have all of these things. Back to rhetoric. We have all these things. Yeah. Okay, we need a clear plan from states, and we need to see the plans from industry as well. Yeah. That's what I'm taking out of it.
I think that's great. Hey, do you also deal with oceans issues? Have you been going to any of the meetings here? I mean, I'm fascinated by that, mainly because we never talk about it. Yeah. When we are now, and I know, Marilyn, this is a big part of your legacy, is what do we do on our oceans issues? Have you been working on that issue as well?
Yeah, we have been working hard, and I have Dr. Lamb right here, my senior climate advisor.
Excellent.
Yes, she's been.
I thought so.
She's been involved in going to all of those meetings, and she's been the champion and making sure that Maryland is at the table and leading in that area.
Excellent.
I just add on to what Serena said in terms of that plan. Because I think it is important for the state to have a plan, and certainly in California, we even have an expectation that cities, localities are also having their plans. I mean, it has to integrate with business, as you said, and so that we're working collectively in the same direction at the same time, right? So, for instance, one of the things that we're doing at Southern California Edison is hardening the grid. We see, of course, extreme wildfires have increased. We had 2 very bad years in 17, 18, and in that time frame, we have spent billions of dollars in grid hardening so that our equipment is not the spark that starts an extreme wildfire. That has to be paired with local planning so that if we're doing construction on a line, that is at something that at the same time the city could be doing their construction, and so it's disrupting the community only one time. As we think about electrification, one part of Ontario, we have 18 circuits that we have to upgrade in the next 3 years. So we're having conversations at that local level of like, oh, this is what it's going to take. And that's road closures, that's traffic control. And so what is it that can be done at the same time so that it can be as least disruptive to the community as we're all moving forward with this transition? We recognize that the electric system is foundational to the success of the country and the states and localities to achieve their climate goals. And so grid reliability, grid resiliency, grid safety, the things that utilities have always focused on are becoming that much more important because an essential service that we've been providing for over 100 years is going to become even that much more critical as more parts of the economy rely on it for their daily lives. And so we have a lot of work to do to ensure that our investments are done in a timely way, are done in a way that ensures that it's there as these other industries transition. I mean, the EPA clean truck rule that's pending, right? One of the biggest issues that's come up is grid readiness, and it's important that the utilities provide that certainty that the grid will be ready for the mobile, electric cars, trucks that are coming, so that there's not an excuse of why they can't meet that new requirement. And so it's important that planning really happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Right on.
Thank you.
I'll be fast.
Thank you, Chris. That's what he went to college and he teaches at U Chicago for. Thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, jump in.
I was going to sort of jump in with my
I forgot that I asked a question.
crystallized moment from the COP, and I'll try to be fast. I've been to a number of COPs, not nearly as many as Gina, and not been nearly as productive at them as Gina. This is the first COP that I've felt so much optimism from the U.S., and we have a lot to be proud of. I mean, a tremendous amount to be proud of. Federal regulations, federal incentives, state policies, state pledges. There's a lot here. And it is also challenging to sort of hold the tension in your head between being proud of our success and where we are, the moment we're in, and just, oh my gosh, how high the stakes are. The National Climate Assessment, it made it crystal clear. And we have so much more to do. So trying to combine those two things in your mind is tricky. And I think the moment allows us to do both in some ways because of the IRA. The IRA is a powerful driver and will do some things on its own. But really the most powerful part of the IRA, as Rick said, I think very well, and I think as Gina said, is that it is allowing us, it's enabling us to do more at the policy level at much lower cost. So a policy that you put in place right now today in the U.S., just as one example, Resources for the Future did this analysis a couple of weeks ago. If you were to achieve a limit on carbon pollution from the electric power sector in 2030, 80% below 2005 levels, which is sort of a critical linchpin of meeting the U.S. NDC, getting that level of abatement from the power sector. Before the IRA, it would cost you about $67, $70 a ton. After the IRA, any guesses? $31. I mean, it's dramatic. And you sort of see those numbers across the board in terms of the cost of abatement, which doesn't mean that it's all going to happen organically, but it does mean that if we regulate it and we require it, that regulatory impact analysis at the federal level or at the state level is going to be a heck of a lot cheaper. So this is the moment to act, and we've got, as someone said, a tailwind at our back.
And this is probably the moment to close as well. You know, I'd like you to join me just in thanking these three women and Rick if he were here. None of your jobs are easy ones. And I feel like you guys have a lot to be proud of for the work that you're doing, the frustration that you take. You know, to me, as much as I love everybody, I love mayors more than anything. Because they're on the ground, and you women don't run away from that at all. You like run towards it. And I think that's what it's going to take to fix the challenges we have and give the people that we love a bright future. And frankly, I feel like there's more optimism in this COP than I've ever felt before. So I think our job is really to keep being as optimistic as we can, but temper that with reality and realism. How do we keep pushing? And I think, you know I myself have pushed my children and my grandchildren more than they'd ever want. I think we should do that with everybody. Yep. They should clean up after themselves. They should finish their work on time. They should pick up their toys, and they should enjoy every moment of life. And so thank you for this wonderful opportunity to shine a spotlight on some terrific human beings doing really important work. Thanks, everybody. Marcine, here you go. I was supposed to give it to you.
Thank you. Just give me 1 second. I just want to close out, so please have your seats. So hello, everybody. I'm Marcine Mitchell. I'm the Senior Vice President for Climate Change at the World Wildlife Fund. And as you know, we're the main organizing NGO for America's All In. And we've just had a great few days of programming. You've just heard from this panel in terms of what the work really needs to be done in order for us to achieve an NDC. And we're so excited that All In is going to be able to help drive this collaborative process between our coalition and the Biden-Harris administration next year to make sure that our subnational voices and our society, all of society voices, are heard as the U.S. government develops its 2035 NDC. And so we hope that this comprehensive stakeholder engagement process becomes an example to the world. We have a chance to be able to take our leadership, as you're saying, again, as the U.S., to increase our collective ambition and reach our climate goals. And again, we need all levels of governments, we love mayors as well, all society to bring the best to this. So this wraps up our events from America's All-In Action Center. And it's been truly a great amount of ambition, of information, of collaboration amongst all of you. And I hope it has really been fruitful and productive. It's made your COP a productive one. We are thrilled that through the work of Mike Bloomberg, along with the COP28 presidency, that COP28 has finally given subnational leaders a real seat at the table. The local Climate Action Summit earlier this week was the first of its kind here at COP, and it put mayors and governors and local officials on the official agenda. And I hope this is not the last time. I hope we will see our mayors and our governors and our city leaders to be going. And so, thankfully, America is All In is not alone. We are not the only ones doing this in the United States. This idea of city, state, parish, business, religious group has gone global. And the All-In Coalition with its partner organizations and members who you've heard of from this week is actually just one of now almost a dozen sister coalitions participating in countries called the Alliances for Climate Action. And starting right now through the rest of the afternoon, we'll be highlighting the work of the Alliance for Climate Action, we call them ACAs, around the world. They've taken the spark that's been ignited in the United States, and they've blazed an impressive path across countries in nearly every region. We have, and WWF, again, is an organizing NGO and supporting alliances in Mexico, Chile, South Africa, Australia, Japan, and even here in the AEU. So I encourage you all to stick around to be inspired and learn from these friends and these colleagues all across the globe, and they have so many great ideas to take back home. And as always, thank you to Bloomberg Philanthropies for their support of America's All In and for the WWF Global Network.
For coming here. As you know, ACA is a multi-stakeholder work group that works under the Champions Group and the climate change practice, where we want to accelerate climate action within the countries under the umbrella of the governments, but accelerating where it needs acceleration. So, we have 3 panels, very exciting panel today, and I will pass it to Luli, now the coordinator of ACA from Mexico, that is doing a great job. Susan is here, that is organizing the communications. And yes, everybody that have been working so hard this day, welcome, thank you for coming here, and I hope you enjoyed. Por favor.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. And it's great to see many of you. I think so many familiar faces that are starting to build up over the years. And it's great to see how many of us are part now of this big family that we started 5 years ago, 6 years ago almost, when we started convening these alliances in different countries of the world to help give climate leaders a platform to demand more ambition from national governments. And so today, we are very happy to share that we have 10 alliances with over 6,000 members. We have alliances for climate action in Australia, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Japan, Mexico, South Africa, the US, the UAE, and Vietnam. And our family continues to grow. Today, we're very excited to welcome representatives from most of these alliances. And we will have a program, as Ricardo said, with 3 events. In the first event, we will discuss the opportunities and roles for non-state actors. What a great opportunity we have at this COP to elevate the contributions of subnational governments and companies, and we will hear more, and also about exciting developments taking part in Philippines. In the second event, we will hear about the developments of the alliance here in the UAE. It was launched last year, and in only 1 year, they've had some amazing developments. And in the third event, we will hear from majors and representatives from Brazil, Japan, Chile, Australia, Mexico, and South Africa to hear about how subnational governments can work more closely with national governments over the next round of NDC implementation. So for the first panel, please welcome me in giving a warm reception to Ms. Trin Custodio, the Executive Director of WWF Philippines, Mr. Gonzalo Muñoz, Climate High-Level Champion for COP25, and Mr. Manuel Pulgar, our Global Lead for Climate and Energy in WWF. If it's okay, I will join you here. So, Trin, COP28 has highlighted an unprecedented way in which subnational governments and non-state actors can contribute towards meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement. And it seems that in many countries this has become apparent, and there's more and more traction. Can you tell us a little bit about what has sparked the interest of companies, cities, and NGOs in Philippines to begin envisioning the creation of a Alliance for Climate Action?
Thanks very much for that, Luli. So first, I would like to recognize the fellow founders and initiators of our Alliance for Climate Action in the Philippines. If it's okay if I just ask you to raise your hand and wave so that you know who in the group you will be part of this network. So starting off with representatives from the Ayala Corporation, one of the biggest conglomerates in our country. We have Wetlands International Philippines, an NGO, and we have actually Mayor Alfredo Coro, who might be stuck outside, but he is the local chief executive of some of the most beautiful gems of our 7,640 islands in the Philippines. We are here to learn from all of you and to seek allies as we develop our concept, and also to prepare for the launch of our Climate Action Philippines Alliance next year. So speaking of the mayor, right, so coming to what sparked the interest in forming our ACA, the idea got started in a sustainability forum that we co-organized with the SM Group, which is our country's largest conglomerate, last year. And it was really a means to carry on the exchanges. It was very important that the participants were already NGOs, companies, and local government units. And it was also great that the ACA model had a formal role under the high-level champions group, because that differentiated our ACA from the other coalitions that our founders were part of and that our intended members were also part of. And our initiating group are all climate leaders in their own right. They all have their own initiatives, but what we were missing really was this platform for accelerating synergies. And that's what we hope our ACA to be. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Trin. And Gonzalo, we've seen that some of these conditions described by Trin in Philippines illustrate a trend that began maybe before COP25, but I think it took special energy after COP25. Can you tell us your views about the evolution about non-state actor and the subnational agenda from COP25 to COP28? How has the notion of collaborative whole economy approach have become more consolidated in the past 3 years?
Thanks so much, Luli. And it's a two-way trajectory, I would say. So most of the work that we're referring to starts with the Lima Paris Action Agenda led by Manuel Pulgar Vidal when he was in the presidency of COP20, and landed very properly at COP21 with the idea of not only the high-level champions, but the global climate action, the idea that non-state actors are fundamental to implement the treaty. There's no way that the governments will do that alone. Quite the opposite. They will fail dramatically if they don't integrate the role of subnational governments. Municipalities are absolutely critical. The reality happens in those territories. The reality happens with the financial sector providing the incentives. It happens with the role of business innovating and doing the work that well aligned, and of course the role of civil society pushing the borders and making the whole of the system integrate in a better way. The other track was the best practitioner that I can refer to, and is the one that is hosting us here, We Are Still In. Because the reasons of existence of We Are Still In, and the phrase itself, or America is all in at this point, but at that point was We Are Still In, WASI, was referring to the topic of, we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. We have elected a president that wants to take us out of the Paris Agreement. We are still in. And who was saying we are still in? Of course, subnational governments like the government of California, New York, and many other ones, municipalities and mayors from all across the country in the United States. A lot of support from financial institutions. Of course, WWF immediately said, we are here to support, and congregating a lot of other civil society organizations and businesses also joining. What it meant was that all of a sudden, between the moment when Trump left the role and since the moment when President Biden started his mandate, in that period of time, I will say the NDC of the United States of America was mostly held by these non-state actors. And they elevated the ambition, as we have seen. So what it means is like, it's a proof of concept that countries have done their job by reaching and signing the Paris Agreement. Afterwards, the work is for non-state actors to implement the agreement and to activate the ambition loop, to say, yes, we are here, you can count on us, we understand that this is urgent, not only for you as a government, it's for all of us as individuals. It is for the whole of our society, and therefore we will keep on moving ourselves as much as we can, and that is immediately detected by the government, and they increase the regulation. That's the mechanism of the ambition loop that was so wisely designed by the architects of the Paris Agreement, including Manuel Pulgar Vidal here on my side. So what happened in 2019 when I was the high-level champion, I have to say probably one of my first calls was to Manuel, and Manuel taught me a lot about the process and a lot about the necessity of integrating these two roles. And then I remember perfectly when we met in New York, and it was Mariana Panuncio talking about this logic, and for me it was like, this is so evident. This is probably the best tool that we have in order to activate the ambition loop and implement the Paris Agreement. It's absolutely perfect, and it has been proven. So let's implement more ACAs all around the world, so we can have not only this group of non-state actors talking about the importance of integrating their own needs and their own understanding of the climate crisis, but also connected at least around one topic that serves the NDC, right? So it's like all municipalities, all businesses, all financial institutions, universities or academic institutions, civil society, everyone saying, okay, what we can do that no one else will do in our country that serves our ministry to fulfill the NDC, or hopefully to enhance the NDC. So in this moment, when we're confronting a radically polarized politics situation in the world, when we go the pendulum from one side to the other, and we see in many countries, as we're seeing now in Argentina. So if there's anyone in Argentina, count on us. Like we want the Argentinian ACA to play an extraordinarily relevant role in the next years, where it's supposed to be confronting a situation of a national leader that says many things, right? But the point is that it might threaten the role of Argentina on mobilizing climate action. Well, this is the moment when that backpack is going to be held by our ACA, right? So we all should be supporting that. We should all be considering the importance of America is all in for the next election. right? And get ready for hopefully supporting the next government in that sense. So in a moment when the politics in the world are so fragile in that sense, well, the ACA plays a much more important role. And also there's another thing happening. We have the Paris Agreement. We have now also, since last year, and Manuel was also very important on that, the Kunming-Montreal Agreement on Biodiversity. We're working towards an agreement on plastics that hopefully is going to be signed in the first months of 2025. We have another agreement that maybe is going to be signed at the end of next year around the desertification treaty. We have Minamata, we have Stockholm, we have many other agreements that talks about the importance of non-state actors to connect and develop the type of measures that governments will require from us. So I think that is also a possibility of the ACAs to understand that we are here also as individuals and as organizations, understanding that when it comes to pollution, when it comes to degradation, when it comes to environmental needs and social needs around this problem and adaptation, well, we're the ones confronting that. We must do it integrating also all of the things, all of the different topics that the different governments are either negotiating or have already been signed. So what I mean for that, if you see that we already have several agreements, once the agreements are signed, it's in the moment of implementation. And that implementation happens in the ACAs. So we don't have to wait, as I said, like we might have another agreement on plastic, another agreement on desertification, period. All the rest are signed. So the only thing that we should do is to implement as much and as fast as possible. And for that, as I said, the ACAs are absolutely the perfect tool.
Thank you very much for that great overview. And Manuel, I'm sure you can contribute to what Gonzalo was saying. Looking at the first round of NDCs, as he explained, was mainly defined by national governments. But now I think that subnational governments have also realized that, as Manuel said, they are carrying the backpack, no, of the NDCs. What conditions do you think need to be in place for subnational governments to take this opportunity to have a more prominent influence in the new NDCs and to increase ambition, but also to gain more capacity for implementation?
Thank you, Luli. Let me start by agreeing with Gonzalo that, no, always, that the Argentinians could develop their own we are stealing just in case, no? That it could be called aquí estamos che, or to be a bit more malcriado, dejate de joder, could be. That is a very Argentinian phrase. But so, to go back to your question, Luli, sorry for that. But I was thinking of what it could be the title of the Argentinian ACA. Luli, more than conditions, I think it is courage. Courage to contribute. Because, look the title of today's event. Road to 2030, and I will make a reflection of 2030. Role of subnational governments and non-state actors, and strengthen NDCs. And we are in the COP28, in the first time ever in which, as part of this ratchet mechanism, we are having the global stocktake. And as you know, the global stocktake, it is a mechanism to identify exactly where we are, how well, how bad, how much, how less we have progressed. But more than that, because probably since the beginning we knew what it would be that balance, more than that, the global stocktake must send a clear message to strengthen NDCs. Because if the outcome of the global stocktake it is weak, the next cycle of the NDCs, it will be as well, exactly the same. And we could lose 5 years. And I am not sure how many of you have already read that today is early in the morning new draft of the global stocktake. There is not any mention on cities, not any mention on subnationals. There are very weak mention to the role of the non-state actors in the Marrakesh Partnership. So what it must be our role to go to connect with negotiators, to go to the media, to talk on these events, to say, no, that is not enough. It is an unbalanced text. Because, okay, it is true, we are talking about energy transition, that it is the key element. We are talking about adaptation, loss and damage, finance. But to have a well-balanced text, we do need to promote a whole of society approach, to strengthen that whole of society approach by strengthening the role of the non-state actors and subnational governments, plus to bring nature more close into the climate debate. So this is the time to contribute, because if not, we will keep the subnational and non-state actors out of the preparation of the new cycle of the NDCs. But it is not just about NDCs. It is also about long-term strategies, because an NDC for 5 years without a clear vision for 2050 won't work well. And many countries, unfortunately, haven't yet developed their long-term strategies. And that is not good, because it is by knowing exactly where are we planning to be in X time of 25 years, 26 years, that we could be more effective in moving things forward. So that is my first reflection, courage and contribution. But also it is about strengthening the ability of subnational governments to develop their own plans and to have those plans feeding the national process. Because if not, can you imagine in a huge country, I am Peruvian, how many district municipalities we have? 1,800. And for sure the national government won't invite the 1,800 municipalities to say something that could contribute or could fit the NDC. It must be the opposite. It must be, again, the courage, the proactivity of those subnational to bring elements into the NDC. And why? Because it is more connected to citizens, to people. It is more connected to the ground. And we know that by the end, it will be at the local level in which things have to be implemented. So that is why the importance of subnational government. Third, I think, again, it is not a condition, but it is probably a communication effort to understand that in a subnational level, things have to be improved, because it is in that subnational level in which we can strengthen energy efficiency. That new text of global stocktake, it is talking about doubling energy efficiency rates. Where that must happen? In the local governments. That must happen in the subnational level. But also it is related to transport. Also the global stocktake, we hope, could include something about electric vehicles, where those electric vehicles are used to being, in the cities. And also it is related to public transport system, more effective public transport system that happen on the cities. When we think about nature-based solutions, there is a connection with cities to integrate the climate effort with the nature objective. So we have to be more clear to communicate to people, to our constituency, to our to individuals, that cities must play, are playing, but also could play even a higher, a more key role. So again, Luli, it is not about conditions. It is about courage, understanding of the process. Because as Gonzalo mentioned, when we started the action agenda, it was in 2014, it is true. We did it because we saw in Warsaw in 2013 that all the non-state actors used to be out of the venue. And we knew that the only way to promote an agreement, it would be by bringing actors into the venue and by doing them party, to be more clear, kind of party. And that is why when we organized our first ever action day, that it was in Lima, we did it in the plenary room. because we also tried to transmit the idea you are as a party. You are part of this process. And for sure, we counted with the support of the Stanley Center, no, that we have always welcomed. Thank you very much. And we did it. And look now. We have created a monster. No, no. I mean, but look this dynamic. It's amazing. There are some people criticizing why we have 100,000 people in a COP. Yeah, there are pros and cons for sure. But this is showing what it is the current state of the process. And with this, I will finish this reflection. That used to be a political one. Before of Paris, this used to be a political process. No, everybody was very well focused on the political decision, and we got it with the Paris Agreement. But the Paris Agreement, it was like a big bang. That is my analogy. And that big bang created an expanding universe in which, for sure, still the political side, it is so important. Negotiators, this is a party-driven process. But all the other side, more people, more aware of climate change and its consequences if we are not able to address the climate change. So it is social. It is economic. It is for sure an economic process. And we can smell and feel that immediately in this COP. It's financial and it is moral. And that is something that we have also to continue transmitting, communicating. This is a moral process. It's an ethical one. And it is because ethical that we have to connect with people. And that means to connect individuals in the local level, even in the poorest areas of the world. So to conclude this first intervention, Luli, it is not conditions. It is understanding and courage.
Thank you very much, Manuel. And thinking for Gonzalo, I think everyone in this room we're all standing in the same side of the street in the subnational non-state actor arena and feeling, I think, what Manuel has described. I didn't know if the monster was ACA or the COP, but I think we have two monsters. But inevitably, we are looking at the other side of the street, and the national governments are on the other side of the street. So what do you think in this process of strengthening the NDCs? What is your expectation of national governments, or what should we demand of national government taking this approach? As Manuel said, we need to be courageous and proactive and get our subnational governments get their feet, in the door. What would you say we need to ask of them?
Yeah, I would think that I start by not expecting to receive, but rather to give. And maybe we might receive something if we give. I would focus on what can we give that might be meaningful for the process and for ourselves. I'm going to use an analogy that I always use when explaining what is a COP and why are we gathering here. So, and please, Manuel, you have been president of COP. You correct me if I'm saying something wrong. But this is like a spaceship. So this is out of the world, right? So imagine that in the minds of the negotiators, they're out of the world. Even they say, like, they talk about the real world. So let's imagine that that's what's happening. They are like in this spaceship that normally in every negotiation, you have different spaceships coming out of the world once they have to negotiate. So we have this spaceship now on climate. We will be, like 2 weeks ago, we were in Nairobi, but we were in a spaceship on the INC3 for plastics. And same thing happens every time that they have to negotiate. They go out of the world. They're very cautious on who's invited to that, super picky. And are you? So that creates a sort of, how do you call casta? A caste, right? They are the ones that are allowed to be negotiated because that's their role. And the rules of the game are that. I'm not criticizing the rules of the game because the rules of the game were set to create the conditions for being isolated and allow every single member state to have a say and to allow the less empowered ones in the real economy to be able even to block, right? So, I mean, the rules of the game have a reason, still are operating, and therefore we have the spaceship. And then Manuel, with many others, he just described it, said, okay, wait, but then we will have to implement. And the implementation will happen down there with those people that are saying they are the responsible of the mess, right? It's not us, they are responsible of the mess. So how do we connect to them? So the Global Climate Action Agenda was like a tube connecting the spaceship with the Earth. And the role of the champion is to manage that tube. And you have, like, imagine different spaceship and different tubes connecting this different spaceship with there. And then all of a sudden, these irresponsible people creating this monster allowed people from the Earth to, like, go up to the spaceship. And that created, nowadays, they are validating, right? Of course, probably many of us as well are like, what, 100,000 people? Wasn't it too much? But in other spaceships, that creates attention. You can see, like, potentially in Minamata or in Stockholm or in the INC, they're not used to have, like, who invited these people to come into our spaceship? They must be down there implementing what we decide, okay? The reality, and a good reality, I would say, from this process is we are already integrated. So why am I referring to this? Because first, it's extremely important for us to respect the process. This is a party-driven process. And therefore, every time that we want to just disrupt or bring the rules of the Earth to the spaceship, that is, at the end, playing against the surf, and sometimes playing against the objective of solving the crisis. So we have to be very wise on how do we intervene in the process, and what's the best way to intervene in the process? Bringing what they want to see. What they want to see, that we are helping to solve the crisis and that we're capable even further with it. That's the only thing that we have to do. Not complain if whatever is not the way we want, not complain if the process is whether too slow or too quick, or they're talking about something that we don't want to. We have to do the job. And if you don't like it, well, there are other spaceships also. Or remain in the Earth, right? But if we're here, and if our purpose is to really be fruitful for the fulfillment of the Paris Agreement, then the only thing that we have to do is go there very respectfully, understanding what are the right connections, and say, hey guys, I have this capacity of removing some tons, or incrementing resilience, or adapting this community, or increasing the capacity of nature, and bring that with science. And I can assure you, and that's the logic of the Paris Agreement, of the Ambition Loop, and the Global Climate Action Agenda, that if done well, then they will detect that and they will feel much more comfortable saying, oh, okay, then we can enhance our NDCs, right? It's not that until potentially the rules are differently. In this moment, the rules are not other than that I'm mentioning. I think that it will be great if the evolution of this takes us to a moment where, first, we can integrate not only the 3 Rio Conventions or everything that is talking about the environment into something like, I would love to see, like, not only 100,000 people, 500,000 people coming to the unique COP, the environmental moment for the planet. So then we can just travel once, I'm saying, because also I'm traveling quite a lot, but then we can just travel, all of us, to one, and I can imagine that design of how we can coordinate, and we're all traveling to our Earth Summit every single year is one. We do the work, probably one negotiator will kill me because she's going to end all of them, but then we will have to provide the conditions for those delegations that have less people to have it. I mean, I see that getting solved. And then, of course, I think that there's also a potential opportunity, of course, I said as well, but there's a potential opportunity with the regenerative artificial intelligence coming to our lives. This conversation will be disrupted by that technology, definitely. Can we use that as non-state actors to help the process to move forward in a better and faster way? But again, showing that we're not just here to talk, we're here to show what we do down there in the Earth.
Thank you so much for that great analogy. And now I have an easy way to explain, as you said, what are COPs. And using another analogy, on the first 2 days of this COP were dedicated to the local climate action summit. And I think for the first time, we saw a great number of mayors and governors that came to COP. And as you said, no, they were invited into the spaceship, and now more people can be inspired, familiarized, and as you said, making the connections of where and how to contribute. So when we were sitting there that day, we were in a room full of mayors and governors, and I spent there quite a few hours. And so I was observing the room, and then I thought, even Michael Bloomberg was in the room at some point, but I thought almost the guy that is making the coffees is the most important guy in the room. You know, everyone goes to him also, and there's a point of common interest. And often we miss, you know, in these big talks, when we're in the spaceship or outside of Earth, like who are the people on the ground and how can we get them on board? Not everyone will be able to come to the spaceship. No, even if we make one COP for all environmental themes, I don't know where we could fit. But Manuel, I wanted to ask your view about how do we ensure, when we were having a conversation, we called it like the social license of the climate regime, the climate movement, because subnational governments or companies need the support of the people to be courageous, to take these bold measures and actions that we are asking them. And some of these measures, like asking them to travel less, to reduce their meat consumption, to not drive their cars so often, they're unpopular, a lot of them. And so I feel we put elected officials and even CEOs sometimes in a difficult position, no? And so how do you think that we can ensure that there's this social license and so that they can be courageous and take this bold action without fear of losing public support?
Yeah, it is true. There is always a cost of a transition. Immediately we can recognize the positive, the easiest way to transition, but also there will always be the painful way to do that transition. That is a good way, or good segue to talk about just transition. What it is about just transition? Just transition, it is to manage well the potential negative consequences of a desired change. That is just transition. So we have clarity on what it must, we have to do, or what it must be done. The point it is how to manage the consequences of that. If I am planning to change the main economic activity of a region to leave behind and to phase out coal, no, probably that could have economic consequences. So there are some tools as just transition to manage those kind of consequences. But I am always thinking that people, it is every day more aware and better informed of what it must be the change. For sure, again, sorry, Argentinian, my friend, no, it will be extremely difficult to switch into having meat. No, in Argentina, it is like, it's so difficult. But we know that a healthy diet includes to have a more diverse diet. That means, again, information. We know what does it means to switch our habits of consumption, and what does it mean to switch into not being so dependent of internal combustion vehicles. So there are many, many things that we have to work on. So that is why subnational government needs to create mechanisms to communicate, but to change behavior. In WWF, I think it was our Swiss office, 2 years ago, they released a very good report on how to work to change or towards behavioral change on citizens, towards addressing climate change in an effective way. And that is something that I am pretty sure that mayors, subnational authorities can promote. Because it is true, the lack of information can create reaction. but well-informed people will immediately understand the need to change. But also, Luli, again, I am bringing something that I've already mentioned. I am always saying, if you don't follow these transitions suggested by science, it is not the Paris Agreement that will punish you, because the Paris Agreement doesn't include any ways, any sanction or any ways to punish anybody. It is the economy on one side, but also you will be punished by extreme events. So that is something that mayors and authorities and subnational, but also the business sector must understand well. If you do like to survive on time, if you do want to have a sustainable economic activities, you have to follow climate conditions. And by now, climate and nature conditions, as it was mentioned by Gonzalo when he refers to the global biodiversity framework. And probably that would be the best way to explain to people the why. The why. No, because look, in Latin America, CEPAL or ECLAC in English, mentioned in a report released, I think, in 2020, that the lack of climate responsibility could mean a structural loss of GDP in 25%. 25% of a structural losing of GDP if you don't follow climate conditions. That is a reality. And if we are not able to understand that, the gap in between developed and developing world, it will be even higher. So by using the economy, sometimes also we can explain to mayors and authorities, to business sector, and even to citizens, why we must start to walk those transitions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you bringing in the topic of just transition, because I think we always, or at least in my case, I often think about the just transition only or mostly in the energy sector. But I think what you are pointing to is that there are transitions in every sector, and we will have to make them just, and we have to anticipate the gains and losses. And that's what the framework for just transition gives us, a framework to look at any transition and anticipate and create the conditions so that you have social support for taking decisions or measures that are hard to confront, at least at the beginning, no? Our first reaction. So, Gonzalo, I don't know if you want to add anything in terms of how you see or how you've thought about transitioning in specific sectors or work areas like plastic, like all the challenges that you said that are related to climate, and that we cannot separate these agendas.
Well, I think that in all of these agendas, one thing that I normally refer to is the importance of watching the film and not just the frame of today, right? The frame of today still is quite depressing and makes us feel like the challenge is so big and the gap is enormous, and therefore that we will never get there. If any of you, mostly the one of us with gray hair or less hair or whatever, that have been following this conversation for a while, we should recognize that even how was our optimism and our capacity of dreaming in terms of solutions before Paris? How was it like 4 or 5 years ago? And we will discover, not that we're great, that doesn't mean that we solve it. Like still, the situation is quite depressive, but there's something happening that we can use for filling that gap, and we will notice the trend. And in many aspects, the trend is one that is showing us quite substantive, positive direction. It is happening with renewable energy, it's happening with batteries, it's happening with, of course, electric vehicles. Like in many other technologies, we're seeing that trend, what we call the exponential change and the S-curve. And in many other sectors, it seems like the curve is starting to ramp into exponential, whereas in some other sectors, we're still not clear. For those sectors, and mostly I would refer to those that are based on nature. Now, we have, I mean, in terms of technology, seems to be ramping up quite well in terms of nature, and it's the capacity of restoring nature and healing the planet in that sense is something that we still need to see. So then what we're mentioning all the time is great to have a vision on 2030 or 2050, but the important thing is how you're going to plan your transition from now to there, and therefore have a very short-term task ahead. Hopefully not more than 2 years. What are you going to do now? So that will bring the sense of urgency to our daily life, right? I mean, I think that we have been improved our community in terms of the vision of the limit being 1.5 degrees and how we understand the importance of regeneration and how we understand the importance of stopping plastic pollution and restoring biodiversity are things that are more and more clear for all of us. And I would say in the narrative is quite set. Now the important thing is what we're going to do now, not what I'm going to do in 2030 or 2050, right? So now the narratives are around the transition plans. The transition plans brought into budgets, brought into hopefully the incentives for the people for what they're going to do in the month, right? So in order not only to have this transition and have different scenarios that will take us to 2030 and 2050, so don't move the target, but then develop the sense of urgency. And in that sense, I think that for me, this is being a cup of urgency. I feel like not only because of the drama that is increasing all around the world, people dying. I was referring the other day, even, very sorry for that, but Taylor Swift, right? I mean, in terms of a very successful case of business, of show, of joy. We all love Taylor Swift, hopefully. I am a Swiftie. But then the world saying, yeah, but the emissions of the jet, what happens with it? People are fucking dying. That's what the highlight was saying in the news. And then all of a sudden, we know that there was a heat wave coming to Brazil. The producers remain with I have 3 daughters that traveled to Brazil for the show. And they were like, no, we will keep it. And then one person, one healthy, young, amazing woman died. And then several hundreds have burns. And she herself was incapable of breathing. So this sense of urgency, I think, is helping us. And it doesn't mean that we have had one person dying. It's like showing us that millions of people are dying every month because of climate crisis. Then at the same time, I see on a very positive way that the adoption of the agenda in the first day, the loss and damage fund, and how much the money is flowing into there. All of those elements are elements of sense of urgency. Having a health day is brilliant because it's bringing a topic of long-termism to a very short aspect of our need of preserving our health and our life, and might help us to even develop this agenda towards some of the things that we did when we were confronting COVID, right? We were capable of doing incredible things, and maybe if we understand that this is a matter of health, meaning people are dying and other species are dying, then, well, we might do some things differently. In the agenda that I'm leading, food, bringing food and water into the conversation and with very concrete commitments. Well, that means that people need to understand that if we don't solve the climate crisis, we will have less and less available food and water. So I see that somehow the sense of urgency is cleaning the mess, and then we can focus on fossil fuels, right? I mean, when are we going to phase out of fossil fuels? But then it's the sense of urgency is positioning more and more, and therefore the logic of the transition plans should be totally integrated in our decision making for everyone in order to just focus on what I'm going to do in the next year, not where I'm going to be in 2050.
a great message to focus also on the immediate and take advantage of this urgency that you mentioned for us in the room, take advantage of this growing sense of urgency so that we can do more. To close this panel, Trin, I would like to just get your sense, hearing about this conversation, just what opportunities do you recognize for creating an alliance in Philippines, and also what key messages or lessons from Manuel, from Gonzalo, do you take with you to take into consideration with your partners?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. The inputs are definitely insightful and helpful for us preparing for our own ACA next year. So let me tell you about the Philippines and what shapes our context. We're one of the top most mega biodiverse countries in the world, in the top 17. We're in the top ranks of climate risk. We have 20 typhoons every year on average, super typhoons increasingly that knock off points from our GDP every year. We're 110 million people, median age of 25. And we're the last Asian economy projected to reap the benefits of our demographic dividend between 2025 to 2070 if we get it right. So we all want the Philippines to succeed. Everybody in the who is joining the Alliance for Climate Action, and that's what will shape our work. On our NDCs, our government said 75% reduction of emissions and avoided emissions by 2030 compared to 2020. Most of that is conditional on aid. Our government also recognizes the whole of society approach and the participation of all sectors. And they also said that we will peak emissions by 2030 and transition to a green economy so that all Filipinos will benefit from low carbon development. Who's going to do that? So our government cannot do it alone, for sure. So our Climate Action Philippines Alliance is also a response to that. In addition, being a united voice of private sector, subnational governments, NGOs, to engage positively with our national government. And I think now with climate very clearly high up in our agenda, it's the first time we have a Philippine pavilion at a COP here in Dubai. So that certainly signals the priority given. So we are here for positive engagement and support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. And our next event will begin